Hello, hello, hello. Nobody warned you. That was the first clue. Too much calm, too much agreement, smiles that arrived, a second too late. You thought it was distance, burnout, bad timing. It wasn't. It was coordination. Silent stretch. Every reaction of yours was logged. Every hesitation measured twice. They fed you comfort, then watched what you swallowed. Doors stayed open just long enough to see if you did rush. You didn't notice at first because it felt polite, professional, normal. That's how traps look now. They expected routine, predictability, a clean psychological profile. Then you shifted. Not dramatically, not emotionally. You paused where you used to speak. You smiled where you used to explain. Something snapped, not loudly. Internally, distortion. That's when their coordination turned into confusion. Because when you stopped playing, the version of you they understood, their entire plan, lost its center, and now they don't ask about you. They track outcomes. That started with your name. You never saw the room. That was the point. No sign on the door, no invitation, just decisions made without your shadow present. While you were living, they were meeting, not loudly, not officially. Quiet chairs, lowered voices, eyes sliding toward exits. This is where names get used, without permission. You weren't discussed as a person. You were discussed as a variable, an if, a risk, a what happens when. Backstage passes. You never asked it Piton, one-way mirrors. You never consented to. They watched reactions from a distance, replayed moments. You forgot minutes later who supports you, who hesitates, who smiles too fast when your name appears. Fake allies volunteered themselves, helpful tones, concerned faces, all while reporting upward, sideways, anywhere but to you. You were the experiment, not to see if you'd succeed, but how you'd fail. They tested pressure points, removed resources, changed rules mid-step, and waited, mocking certainty in their posture, because people like them believe awareness arrives late. They assume you're busy surviving, too distracted to notice, patterns repeating. But the joke, you felt the room before you ever saw it. That's what scares them, because once you sense where the hidden room is, you're already inside. Their plan, the test didn't arrive announced. No countdown, no instructions. It blended into routine, emails, conversations, opportunities that felt slightly off. Rules existed until you followed them. Then they shifted. Targets moved, mid-stride, criteria rewritten. After submission, you were told to be patient, then punished for waiting, decisive, then labeled reckless. That's not confusion, that's design. A maze with invisible walls. Every turn feels possible until your shoulder hits something unseen. You weren't lost, you were contained. The exam was rigged before you ever sat down. Scores decided before answers were written. Secret clubs do this. They test loyalty by contradiction. See who breaks, see who begs for clarity. Most do. They ask for feedback. They explain intentions. They apologize for things they didn't break. Passing was never the goal. Failure was the data. They needed to know where you bend, where you leaked out, where you start negotiating with yourself. That's why success made them nervous. You weren't supposed to adapt this fast. You weren't supposed to remain intact inside a system built to erode you. Every unfair rule was a provocation. Every contradiction, a trapdoor. And the real taunt, the moment you realized there was no winning, you stopped trying to pass. That's when it changed. Not with noise, not with rebellion, with refusal. You stopped reacting on cue. Questions landed, and you didn't rush to catch them. Accusations hovered, and you let them float. You didn't defend, didn't clarify, didn't chase approval. That was never real. That silence, it wasn't emptiness, it was control. They expected emotion, a spike, a crack. Instead, you gave them nothing familiar, like stepping off the chessboard mid-game, while they're still arguing about strategy. Moves mean nothing. When the player leaves, they tried harder, changed tone, softened language. Interrogations disguised as concern. You smiled at the wrong moment, not arrogance, recognition. Laughing mid-interrogation does something strange to people who rely on pressure. It reminds them they're not in charge of your internal world. Yes, when the energy shifted, not outward, inward, you moved unpredictably, not chaotic, just uninterested. In the script, you chose paths with no visible reward, declined advantages. That came with strings. They lost their read on you. Patterns stopped repeating. Profiles went stale, because character only exists inside expectation. And the moment you stepped outside the role they assigned, you weren't resisting the system anymore. You were irrelevant to its control. That's when they realized they weren't testing you. You were testing them. Confusion never arrives like panic. It starts subtle, a delay, a message rewritten twice, a meeting that needs rescheduling. Power doesn't vanish. It leaks, slow enough for them to pretend nothing's wrong. Instructions stop aligning. One voice says, wait. Another says, act now. You receive both. That's crossed wires. Systems built on control depend on clean signals. The moment signals contradict, authority starts arguing with itself. They scramble quietly, because scrambling loudly would expose the fracture. Surveillance feeds glitch, not technically, psychologically. They can still see you, they just can't interpret you. Every move you make fits multiple explanations. That terrifies planners. You're calm, almost entertained, not because you're winning, but because you recognize the pattern breaking. You slow down. They rush. H. You ask nothing. They over-explain. That reversal, that's the leak. Decisions stall, waiting for consensus that never forms. Approval chains loop. Eyes dart sideways before answers land. You watch it happen without interference, like a surgeon, letting the anesthesia fully settle. You don't confront, you don't accuse, you let contradiction do the work. Because when control systems lose coherence, they expose who was pretending to be in charge all along. Confusion spreads fastest where authority was always borrowed, and now every instruction they give you reveals more about their instability than your position. They thought chaos would be loud. They never prepared for it to be this quiet. It doesn't happen all at once. Masks never fall in a single motion. Slip, a tone changes. Advice arrives late. Support becomes conditional. That's when you see it. The mentors who warned you just enough to look helpful, but never enough to make you independent. Concern that only activates when you stop needing it. Guidance with strings you were never told about. The curtain tears, not from force, but from repetition. You hear the same phrases from different mouths. That's coordination. Mirrors crack when reflections stop matching. Someone praises you in private, questions you in public. Someone protects your image, then quietly edits it when you're not in the room. That's reputation control, not destruction, management. They never wanted you gone. They wanted you contained. Puppets don't need chains if the strings are invisible. But strings only work when the subject believes the movement is their own. You don't anymore. Every interaction sharpens. Every smile gets measured, not with paranoia, with clarity. You stop filling gaps with good intentions. You stop assuming alignment. The picture completes itself. Not dramatic, accurate. And the most unsettling part, they don't realize their masks are gone. They think you're still guessing, still hoping, still confused. You let them, because once you see clearly, you don't rush to announce it. You adjust position and watch who panics when the strings stop pulling. Something in the room has changed direction. You feel it before they admit it. Eyes linger longer. Questions get careful. Silence stretches, waiting on you. You're no longer watched, you're measured. Every word you don't say creates weight. Every pause reshapes the atmosphere. It's a gravity shift. What used to orbit them now bends toward you. They adjust schedules, revise tone, reframe expectations to match your presence. That's adaptation. Hunters do this. When they are unsure where the threat is, they check exits, reconfirm alliances, speak in hypotheticals. You don't speed up, you don't dominate. You stay controlled, calm like certainty that doesn't need applause. Your silence isn't absence, it's pressure. It forces movement around you. People reveal priorities when they're trying to stay relevant. You let inevitability do the work. No confrontations, no declarations, just positioning. You choose when to engage, when to withdraw. They follow your timing without realizing it. That's the reversal. Not power seized, power acknowledged. They stop asking what you're thinking. They start asking what you'll do next. And that question, unanswered, controls the room better than noise ever could. Afterward, everything looks calmer. That's how endings hide. They soften the story. Call it timing, momentum, luck. You don't correct them. Let them believe the outcome slipped through their fingers by accident. That version lets them sleep. What they won't admit, even to themselves, is that control failed quietly. No explosion, no scandal. Just a gradual realization that their influence no longer reaches you. You walk differently now. Not heavier, more precise. Blueprints drawn from scars, not to relive them, but to build around them. You recognize systems faster, spot patterns earlier, exit traps before they close. That's graduation. The exam doesn't repeat once you understand. It was never fair. They keep playing the old rules. You don't. You've rewritten the test after passing by refusing to participate. Legacy isn't loud. It's felt when rooms adjust before you speak, when plans account for your absence or your arrival without announcement. They planned everything, every outcome, every failure, every limitation. They thought AP applied to you. You let them keep that illusion because the only detail they never modeled, the one variable they couldn't simulate, was what happens when someone learns the system and outgrows it. They planned everything except what you'd become